In this feudal village, the villagers would select a beautiful young girl every few years to be sacrificed to the mountain god, praying for good weather, bountiful harvests, and prosperity in the future. Enma lived in such a feudal mountain village. One day, a butterfly that seemed to be dead miraculously revived in Enma's hands. In reality, the butterfly was just asleep, not dead. But this scene was spread as a rumor by other children, and soon the villagers began to believe that Enma was a monster, starting to distance themselves from her and even bullying her. From that moment on, aside from Enma's parents, no one in the village would come near her. But there was one boy named Santaro who always stood by her and supported her. Soon the day for the mountain god's sacrifice arrived, and Enma was of course chosen to be the sacrificial offering. Her parents were powerless to stop this. However, Santaro couldn't bear to let Enma become the village's sacrificial victim. So he hid her behind the mountain god's temple. In the following days, he brought Enma clean clothes and food every day. Although the environment there was harsh and Enma couldn't leave as long as Santaro was with her, she didn't feel as scared in Enma's heart. The happiest moments were when she sang with Santaro. Santaro also made her a promise that he would always protect her. But in recent years the villagers' harvests had been poor, and they started to suspect that the mountain god wasn't satisfied with this year's sacrifice. At the same time, Santaro's daily trips up the mountain, regardless of the weather, began to raise the villagers' suspicions. Over the years, Enma grew even more beautiful. Santaro truly loved her. There were many times he wanted to escape with her from this feudal village, but then an unexpected event occurred. The villagers had been following Santaro and found the hiding place. In their anger, they blamed the poor harvests on Enma. Santaro tried to take Enma and flee, but his father held him down in his father's eyes. Santaro had already done enough for Enma, but the villagers never considered Enma as a human being. To make amends to the mountain god, the villagers captured Enma's parents and planned to bury the entire family alive. Santaro was then branded a deceiver of the mountain god. In order to make him atone for his sin, the villagers forced Santaro to bury Enma and her parents alive. Santaro resisted strongly, but with continuous pressure from the villagers and his own father, he eventually relented. He picked up a shovel and began to bury them. In that moment, Enma's heart seemed to be torn apart with an unbearable pain. She had once trusted and relied on him completely. Just then the villagers seized the shovel from Santaro's hands, and with one shovel after another, they buried Enma's family alive. Enma was filled with despair. She hated everyone in the village, including Santaro. In the end, Enma, with an overwhelming sense of resentment and hatred, completely lost her life's vitality. But that very night Enma, consumed with anger and hatred, miraculously came back to life. She sang the song that she had once sung with Santaro and set the heartless village ablaze, turning it into a sea of fire. However, at this moment, Santaro, filled with guilt towards Enma, had already run out of the village and thus narrowly escaped the calamity. Santaro saw Enma from a distance. At that moment, he completely broke down. He ran while laughing hysterically. The branches scratched his body, but he felt no pain at all. The injuries Santaro suffered were nothing compared to what Enma had endured. From then on, Enma became the messenger of hell. People called her Hell Girl. In her heart there was no love, nor was there hatred. She lived in the sea of blood-red flowers in hell, and she stayed there for 400 years. During the 400 years as Hell Girl, she witnessed all the evil of humanity through her scarlet eyes and saw through all the suffering of the world. From that time on, a legend began to spread among the people. The legend spoke of a website called Hell Correspondence, which only opens at midnight. If someone enters the name of a person they detest, on this website, Hell Girl, Enma will appear and give them a straw doll. If the person unties the red string on the straw doll, Enma will send the target individual to hell. However, the cost of using the service is that the requester will also be sent to hell after their death. One day, Enma received a request for help from a girl named Noriko. The reason was that she had been suffering long-term abuse from her mother-in-law, Shizuki. Noriko grew up in an orphanage, and she was naturally beautiful. By chance she caught the eye of Shizuki, who had been financially supporting the orphanage, and Shizuki wanted her to become her daughter-in-law. Everyone in the orphanage envied Noriko because Shizuki was a renowned doll master in the local area. Her family was wealthy and influential. 10 years quickly passed, and Noriko grew more mature and beautiful. Shizuki, looking at the perfect Noriko, saw her as if she were admiring her own creation. It turned out that over these 10 years, Shizuki had personally taken care of Noriko's meals and daily life. But rather than caring for her, it was more like abuse. It could be said that Shizuki never treated her as a human being. In these 10 years, Noriko was never allowed to eat her fill. Whenever her weight increased even slightly, she would be severely punished by Shizuki. In Shizuki's eyes, Noriko was nothing more than a perfect doll. Noriko didn't dare to resist, so she would go to her fiancé, Yukikuma, to complain. Yukikuma would gently comfort her and ask her to prepare breakfast for the next day. Noriko was overjoyed because she finally had the chance to eat a full meal. She woke up early and began preparing the breakfast. But when she brought the prepared meal to the dining room, she discovered that her mother-in-law and husband had already eaten. At that moment, she was completely hopeless. She turned to Yukikuma again for help, but to her surprise, Shizuki found out. Shizuki locked Noriko in a room, forbidding her to go outside. Although Noriko was already beautiful enough, Shizuki still didn't think she was perfect enough. In Shizuki's eyes, a perfect doll should have eyes filled with death and despair. Noriko completely broke down. At the same time, she remembered the legend of Hell Girl that was passed around in the streets. At midnight, Noriko logged into the Hell Correspondence website and entered Shizuki's name. Soon Enma appeared and handed her a straw doll. Enma told her that as long as she pulled the red string on the straw doll, a soul contract would be formed and Enma would drag Shizuki into hell. However, the price was that Noriko's soul would also fall into hell after her death to suffer endless pain and torment. Upon hearing these words, Noriko hesitated. Her mind was in turmoil, and she wanted to go for a walk to clear her head. Unknowingly, she found herself at the orphanage that had raised her, but she was spotted by Shizuki. That night, Noriko endured the most brutal beating from Shizuki. Noriko finally broke down, but her desperate gaze pleased Shizuki greatly, because that was the look a perfect doll should have. Noriko locked herself in a room and she finally made up her mind. She pulled the red string from the straw doll. At that moment the soul contract was sealed and Shizuki's judgment from hell began. Enma's followers immediately found Shizuki and transformed her into a doll. But even after Shizuki became a doll, she still didn't recognize her own wrongs. She even thought of herself as a deity among dolls. For such a heartless, vicious old woman, Enma felt that hell was the perfect place for her. Enma then began chanting a spell. When Shizuki awoke again, she found herself floating above the river Styx of the dead. Enma was rowing a small boat, slowly taking her to hell. Once everything was over, Noriko finally felt that she could begin a happy life with Yukikuma. But Yukikuma suddenly said to her, "Your eyes, they're like a doll's." Enma shuttles back and forth between the human world and hell, carrying out various tasks. Aside from those who summon her, no one can see her. In her heart, there is no love, no hatred, not even any emotions. But everything changed on the day a girl named Tsugumi appeared. Tsugumi was able to see Enma. Not only that, she could occasionally see things from Enma's perspective. On several occasions, she even witnessed the terrifying scenes of Enma dragging people to hell. This caused Tsugumi's father, Shibata, to feel both fear and joy. The fear was because Tsugumi could see the existence of Hell Girl, and the joy was because Shibata saw an opportunity to profit from Hell Girl. Shibata was a journalist, often earning money by secretly investigating scandals of celebrities. He had also heard of the legend of Hell Girl, so he researched much about her, but found nothing. Finally, one day, Shibata found a book about Hell Girl in a bookstore. This book contained a wealth of information about Hell Girl. Following the clue from the book, he eventually found the author. Masao. Masao told Shibata that not only had he seen Enma, but he had also signed a soul contract with her. Then, Masao began to tell the story of his youth. At that time his wife had an affair, and her lover was Masao's best friend. Masao was devastated, and for the first time he had the urge to kill. So he thought of the legend of Hell Girl that was passed down among the people. But in those days there were no computers or phones. The only way to summon Enma was through the most primitive method of mailing letters. Enma appeared soon after, and a soul contract was formed between her and Masao. From that day on, Masao's wife and that man disappeared together. He knew that Enma had fulfilled his wish, but from that moment on he bore a mark on his chest. Masao knew that this was the mark of his soul being sold to hell. It also meant that after his death he would fall into hell. Masao told Shibata that he had a terminal illness and wouldn't live much longer. He could die at any time. He then told Shibata many things about Enma. Masao was deeply fascinated by Enma's supernatural power. For this reason he had collected many photos and paintings of Enma. Shibata hoped that Masao would come to his senses, and said that it was Hell Girl who had ruined his life. But Masao said that he didn't regret it. If Enma hadn't helped him at that time, perhaps he would have died of depression. Long ago, Masao made the final stroke on the painting of Enma, then left this world. When he woke up again, he found himself floating above the river Styx of the dead. He finally saw Enma once more. Enma told him that hell was a vast place, and perhaps Masao could find a place to settle there. After Masao's death, Shibata decided to take Tsugumi and seek out Hell Girl, hoping to uncover her mysterious veil. Finally, on this day, Tsugumi sensed Enma's presence, but the appearance of Shibata and his daughter suddenly triggered painful memories in Enma from 400 years ago. These memories were ones she had never dared to face, the past that had led her to fall into hell, and the origin of her becoming Hell Girl. So Enma decided to break the rules of hell and kill the father and daughter. The reason for her actions was that she sensed the presence of Santaro. The one she hated most 400 years ago was actually an ancestor of this father and daughter. This deep-rooted hatred from her heart drove Enma into madness, and she stopped at nothing to kill them. Enma's subordinates tried to stop her, fearing that she would face severe punishment from hell for violating its rules. But at this moment Enma was already consumed by madness, completely blinded by her resentment. Despite her subordinates' desperate attempts to stop her, they failed. Shibata and his daughter were struck by Enma's attack, falling into the water. Enma was also struck by a lightning bolt as punishment for violating hell's rules. She would pay the price for her impulsive actions, but Enma felt no regret. The three-eyed spider, her superior, was the one who had initially granted Enma her position as the messenger of hell. Now, because of the grave sin Enma had committed, the three-eyed spider prepared to revoke her status as a hell messenger and exiled her to the deepest part of hell, where she would be punished forever. However, Enma knew she couldn't return yet because the fire of hatred inside her heart still hadn't been extinguished. So she broke free from the three-eyed spider's grip and escaped back to the human world. Enma instructed her subordinates to keep watch over Shibata while she directly approached Tsugumi. Enma transformed into Tsugumi's mother, Ayumi, and told her a secret about her mother. Ayumi was someone Shibata had pursued tirelessly during his university days, not long after they got married and had Tsugumi, in order to give the two of them a better life. Shibata works tirelessly day and night, sometimes not returning home for several days at a time. As a result, Shibata often neglected Ayumi's feelings, but one day, while Shibata was working, he caught a glimpse of his wife's affair. This caused him to lose all face in front of his colleagues. He couldn't believe Ayumi would betray him. Later, Ayumi genuinely begged Shibata for forgiveness, but he angrily yelled at her and sent her away not long after Ayumi died in a car accident. Upon learning the truth, Tsugumi was manipulated by Enma and decided to take revenge on her father. Enma then handed her a straw doll and explained how to use it. At this moment, Tsugumi was completely overwhelmed, her mind spiraling into madness. Just as she was about to pull the red string on the straw doll, Shibata rushed over in time. Shibata's arrival made Enma furious, and she even harmed her loyal subordinates. This time, Enma was determined to destroy the descendants of Santaro, and no one could stop her. She then took Shibata and Tsugumi into the scene of Ayumi's car accident. Seeing this, Shibata fell to his knees. He regretted it deeply. He wished it had been him who died. Instead, Shibata's repentance melted Tsugumi's hatred in an instant. At that moment, she realized that her father wasn't to blame. It was fate that had been cruel to them all. Her parents had loved each other, but had also hurt each other. They had missed each other, but were now facing eternal separation. But some love had once been real, just like Sentaro's love for Enma 400 years ago. He truly loved her back then, and Shibata truly loved Ayumi, and more than anything he loved their daughter Tsugumi. The moments they spent together, happy and content, were genuine and from the heart. Tsugumi's words triggered memories deep within Enma's heart. At that moment, she no longer loved Santaro, nor did she hate him. Then the three of them went to a temple together. This temple was built by Santaro as an act of repentance. Enma glanced at the temple and then released hellfire. The love and hatred deep within Enma's heart were burned clean by the fire. As she turned away, she transformed back into the Hell Girl, a being without love, without hatred, and without any emotions at all.